Welcome to NHL Quick Hits. I'm David Crosby here with Steele Roden, and what a week in the hockey world. Alexander Ovechkin continued his climb up the all-time goal-scoring list, passing Brett Hull for fourth with his 742nd goal. The Lightning extended their point streak to 7 games, while handing the Panthers their fourth straight loss in the Battle of Florida. Steele, we might have jinxed the Panthers talking up about how good they were, and now all of a sudden they can't buy a single win. And of course, there were a couple rookie goaltenders who made their debut, and they're never going to forget them. 8 years after being drafted, Zach Fucale won his first ever NHL start in Washington's 2-0 win over Detroit. And he became the first goalie in Capitals history to debut with a shutout. And while the final stat line wasn't as pretty, Joseph Woll won his NHL debut for the Leafs as well as they beat the Sabres thanks to Morgan Rielly's goal with 12 seconds left in a 5-4 victory. With a few young players making waves and a bunch of star players on the precipice of making their returns to the league, we've got a lot to discuss in a fun segment later on in the show. But as we do every week, we're going to start by helping fantasy hockey managers sift through their waiver wire and target the best available ads for week 6. So starting with players owned in half of fantasy leagues or less, Steele, who are you looking at this week?
Yeah, for 50% owned or less, I've got Evan Bouchard of the Edmonton Oilers. He's actually owned at 41%, which is a little bit more than I expected of him. But he's been actually a phenomenal player, phenomenal defensive pair for Darnell Nurse, the first pairing for the Edmonton Oilers as well. That connection that they've got going has been really good in the few games that I've watched for the Edmonton Oilers. He's on the second power play unit as well. He's got 2 goals, 6 assists, 2 of those assists on the power play. 32 shots, 13 hits, and 21 blocks for a total of 101 fantasy points. So he's actually been a lot better than I expected. He was actually only projected to reach 193 fantasy points this year. So he's already halfway there. So if you can pick him up now and he plays the entire year, which I would think with the way he's playing right now, he should. If he knock on wood, hopefully he doesn't get injured. But if he plays the entire year, he's going to record a lot of points in all of those categories that you need a defenseman to record for you. So again, like I said, in those few games that I've actually watched of the Edmonton Oilers, he looks really good out there. He's poised with the puck. He's not scarce with it. He's not scared. Sometimes those young defensemen, get a little bit in their own head and start coughing up pucks in their own zone and in the neutral zone. But he's looked really good. I think Darnell Nurse has been really great pairing for him, and that's who I've got at 50% owned or less. Evan Bouchard would be a really good pickup for your fantasy league.
Yeah, that's a really nice pick. And yeah, you mentioned the pairing with Nurse. They've been fantastic. A lot of people in Edmonton are really high on Bouchard, and they've kind of had high hopes for him for a couple years, and it looks like he's finally getting it all together there. It's funny, we've talked about Edmonton seemed like a place for so long that had everything but defense, and now you look and they have 4 really solid defenders there. So you wonder why Edmonton had such a great start to the season. A lot of the credit, of course, goes to Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Blue line right now is being overlooked, and Bouchard probably most of all of them. For me personally, I went with Alex Nedeljkovic. Now, it's funny, Steele and I don't actually talk about which players we're going to pick heading into this. We just share them with each other heading into the show, and we actually had picked Alex Nedeljkovic. That's how you know this is a good ad for this week. Both Steele and I wanted to add Nedeljkovic. Now, he has been quietly fantastic so far this season, and especially lately. He's 4-2-2 with a .918 save percentage this season, but he is 3-1 with a .937 save percentage in the first half of November. Detroit has been rotating starts for Nedeljkovic and Thomas Greiss, but I think Nedeljkovic is proving he deserves a shot to be the number 1 there. If Detroit continues to rotate starts as they have, that would set Nedeljkovic up with 2 starts in week 6 against the struggling Dallas Stars. They've lost in 6 of their last 8 games, and the league worst Coyotes on Saturday night, who have scored 1 or less goals in 6 of their last 9 games. Now, that is pretty much the floor that you're looking at from Nedeljkovic in week 6, but this could be the week that Ned starts to steal a bigger share of this crease, and you could even be looking at 3 starts. So if you need a goalie, Nedeljkovic is definitely your guy. Next up, Steele, players owned in 30% of leagues or less. Who are you targeting in week 6?
Yeah, for 30% owned or less, we last week we talked about Jordan Eberle. I've got his line mate, Jaden Sports. He's only owned in 24% of leagues across Yahoo. Like I said, he's on the first line with Jordan Eberle and Alexander Wenberg. That line has been the best line, and those three players have been their best players for the Seattle Kraken. Even though they've been struggling, Phil Grubauer has been pretty terrible to start the season this year. But those three guys are producing for the Seattle Kraken offense. 3 goals, 8 assists, 37 shots, 22 hits for 109.30 fantasy points in 15 games this year. He's on the second power play unit, but as of yet, he still hasn't recorded any power play points. So I would expect that to turn around soon where he can get on the board on the power play and help his team out. But like I mentioned, that chemistry that Eberle and Wenberg have right now for the Seattle Kraken is just electric. And they're the top 3 players. And again, if those 2 guys, Schwartz and Eberle, are available to pick up, I would suggest picking up both of them because they are the best players and they produce the most for the Seattle Kraken.
I love that pick as well, Steele. And I went with Mikael Granlund this week, and he's got that dual eligibility at center and right wing. And you better move fast to pick him up because his ownership jumped 10% in week 5, and for good reason. He had a monstrous 4-assist night in a 4-3 win over the Blues on Thursday. Then he buried against Arizona Saturday night to give him 6 points in his last 3 games. And he's actually got 16 points in 15 games so far this season. Nashville is on a road trip north of the border in week 6. So they face the Leafs, Senators, and Canadians. And he could be a longer term hold thanks to a 4-week slate in week 7. Now, like I suggested with Drake Batherson and Josh Norris tandem a couple weeks back, if Matt Duchene, who is 66% owned, is still on your waivers, and you compare Duchene and Granlund together, Duchene also has 16 points in his first 15, so that would be a really nice tandem. If you can get one or even both of them, you'd really luck out, and you're looking at a good 2 weeks of production there. Last but not least, those rostered in 15% of fantasy leagues or less, who you got, Steele?
Fellow Nashville Predator player. He's only owned in 11% of leagues, and that's Tanner Jeannot of the Nashville Predators. 5 goals, 3 assists, 28 shots, and 40 hits for 116.20 fantasy points. He's a human wrecking ball every single time he's on the ice. If he sees you, he's going to finish his check, and he will hit you hard. He's one of the top, I believe, top 10 or top 15 players in the league right now, leading the NHL in hits. So every time he steps on the ice, he is not afraid to put his weight behind his checks, and he'll rub you against the boards and finish that very smoothly too. So for me, I like the way he's played so far. He's on the second line right now, so we'll see maybe when they get Matt Duchene back to see where he'll slip inside in that lineup. But as of right now, he's a phenomenal player, and I think he'd be a great asset for your fantasy league heading into week 7.
Fantasy managers in banger leagues better get to know Jeannot's name really quickly because he is definitely a productive player. In fact, he is the type of player that all Leafs fans were hoping they were going to get with Nick Ritchie, and they're just not getting it. So Tanner Jeannot is that guy if you're looking for somebody who can produce for you across the board. My last pick today is Robert Thomas, another one that could pay dividends for multiple weeks. St. Louis Blues second line center. He's playing beside Vladimir Tarasenko every night. He centers the second power play unit, and he has a really nice slate this week. He faces the Coyotes, Sharks, and Stars in week 6. As a little bonus, St. Louis plays 4 games in the first 6 days of week 7. So if he continues producing this week, he'd be a nice hold into next week as well. Now, Thomas gets a little bit lost in the shuffle there in St. Louis, probably due to the down season he had last year, but he's already matched last year's point total this season with 12 points in his first 13 games. And while he doesn't necessarily rack up those peripheral stats, he contributes a few blocks and penalty minutes as well. And he centers the Blues' top penalty kill unit. So leagues with shorthanded points, that's a nice little bonus for you there as well. Now, a ton of teams are dealing with injuries to some of their best players, but thankfully, a few of them are finally starting to return. Mark Stone came back to Vegas's lineup after being sidelined for a month, and he tallied an assist in the night 7-4 smackdown of the Canucks on Saturday night. So much for me loving the goaltending there in Vancouver. It's been an absolute disaster for Thatcher Demko this week. Sidney Crosby played just one game after returning from injury before once again hitting injured reserve thanks to COVID. But he actually played against Washington today. He's in that game against the Capitals right now, and his return comes at the perfect time because the Penguins have dropped 3 of their last 4 games. So, Steele, let's talk about a few guys that are still on the shelf that fantasy managers could potentially target in a trade to steal them from some struggling teams who need help right now. We're going to compare 2 players with similar ownership and projections for the rest of the season, and Steele is going to pick which one he would target in any potential trade and what his expectations are for them once they return. First up, Capitals center Nicklas Backstrom is back to practice, but there is still no exact date for his return or update from the coaching staff. He's 82% owned and was given a projected rank of 62 by Yahoo heading into the season. The other option, Penguins center Evgeny Malkin. He's 79% owned and was ranked 20 spots lower than Backstrom heading into the year. That's probably because that knee surgery he had back in June was supposed to hold him out until December or January. Now, he might be slightly ahead of schedule. He's already working out. He's back on the ice a little bit, not fully at practice, but things are looking good for Malkin's return. So which of these 2 star centers are you targeting, Steele, and what kind of production would you expect once they're back on the ice?
Well, I would expect pretty much the same production from both these players. They're phenomenal centers and they're phenomenal players for the teams that they've been with for their entire careers. But I'm going to have to go with Nicklas Backstrom here. I think pretty much everyone can agree that Evgeny Malkin has had the better career, obviously with the multiple Stanley Cup wins. He's averaged over a point per game throughout his entire career, while Backstrom is just under a point per game. But I'm targeting Backstrom just because of how injury prone I feel Malkin is. Especially with this knee injury, it's a serious thing that you have to take really, really good care of. And for that purpose, that's why I'm targeting Backstrom. I think when he gets back into the lineup, he'll slide back in with Ovechkin on the first line. He has a little bit more consistency. Backstrom has more hits, more blocks. He's a playmaker, a better playmaker than Evgeny Malkin is. And I think because of this and the way that I've seen Backstrom be consistent and not get injured as much as Malkin, I'm going to have to target him for my fantasy league because it's too much of a risk with someone having knee surgery, as well as the amount of times that he's already been out of the lineup throughout his entire career. It's a real catch-22. You could go either way, but in this time, I have to go with Nicklas Backstrom.
Yeah, I don't think there's a wrong choice there. And this is the perfect time to target these 2 players because it seems like they both should be back within the next month or so, but there isn't exactly a date left. So whoever owns them in their league, especially if they're struggling, they might not want to hold them any longer than they have without having that return date set already. Next up, a pair of players working their way back from lower body injuries. Mark Stone's teammate, Max Pacioretty, is finally out of his walking boot after a month on injured reserve already, yet there is still no timetable for his return, and he doesn't really appear close yet either. Pacioretty is owned in 93% of Yahoo leagues and was projected to finish 119th in Yahoo's rankings. The other choice is TJ Oshie, who is still in a walking boot, but considered week to week after nearly 3 weeks on IR. So he may actually come back quicker than Pacioretty based on what expectations are right now, despite the fact he's still in his walking boot and Pacioretty is not. Now, Oshie was playing really well when he got hurt. He's owned in 86% of Yahoo leagues, and he had a preseason rank of 109. So who would you rather target in a trade, Steele?
I have to go again with the Washington Capitals forward TJ Oshie. And I'm, obviously looking at their stats, they pretty much have the same amount of points over their career. Oshie has 240 more blocks, 220 more hits than Pacioretty. So you're going to get a lot more points from Oshie over Pacioretty because of the way that he plays the game. He's a very physical player out there when he's in the offensive zone, and he's not afraid to use his body and lay people out on the ice. But again, he'll slide right back in on the top line with Ovechkin, and if Backstrom comes back at the same time with those 2 guys. But even then, if he gets fitted in on the second line, and Evgeny Kuznetsov, who slides down to the second line, who's played really phenomenal this year for the Washington Capitals, it's going to work out perfectly either way for Oshie and the Capitals moving forward once he comes back from the injury. But he's got a lot of net front presence. He loves that high slot position on the power play, and they love going to him when he's in there. So For me, I've got to target TJ Oshie here. I think as of right now, he would be the most beneficial player for your fantasy league if you can acquire him.
Yeah, I think for leagues that reward you for hits and blocks, I think Oshie is the right pick here. But I will say, as a long-term target, I think Pacioretty actually has the edge for me, because if Jack Eichel can come back in 3 months from now, you could have Max Pacioretty with Eichel and Stone on a really, really good line in Vegas for your fantasy playoffs. So just something to think about there. Both great options. I would be trying to acquire both of these guys in a trade if they were on the block right now. Our last pairing is a couple of underrated wingers who are the best forwards on their respective teams. Patrik Laine had a strong start to this season with 10 points in his first 9 games. He's expected to miss another 3 to 5 weeks with an oblique strain. He is currently owned in 85% of Yahoo leagues, and he was ranked way too low heading into the season at 165. The second option is a really underrated winger and the owner of perhaps the best mustache in the entire league. Forsberg is owned in just 73% of Yahoo leagues, and he was ranked 108 heading into the year. He had 7 points in his first 9 games. He is week to week with an upper body injury. But Steele, we've already talked about how much better Nashville has looked this season, especially offensively. So I expect him to benefit from that when he comes back. Which of these two would you be targeting in a trade?
Again, it's another tough situation here with Philip Forsberg and Patrik Laine. Forsberg has played 2 to 3 more years in Laine in the NHL, about 150 more games. So based off the stats, they're pretty much dead even. But I'm going to have to go with Patrik Laine here. He's finally free of John Tortorella, and that's why we're starting to see him produce a little bit more. And he's passing the puck more. He's got 7 assists. 7 of those points are assists. So I love the way he's played so far. He's got his confidence back. He's got the juices flowing. He's skating well. He's still got one of the best shots in the entire league. And I think he's gonna get close to 40 goals. I predict that he gets 35 goals by the end of the year. Hopefully, he can come back sooner rather than later, so we can try to get to 40. But again, I've got to go with Patrik Laine here. I just love the way he's played so far at the beginning of the season.
I'm with you all the way here, Steele. For anybody out there who didn't watch our draft preview shows heading in and they missed out on Patrik Laine, being able to steal him in one of those middle rounds, it's all right. You have a chance to potentially make up for that and swing a deal for him this season. That's all we have for today, but please like, follow, and subscribe to our channel. Follow us on social media. And as we mentioned last week, we've been getting some great fantasy hockey related questions in our comment section. So please keep those coming this week. That's going to do it for today's episode. On behalf of Steele Road, I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.